Welcome back. Breakout time, and that's when Francia left the room. Hey, thanks, Jippe, for coming back. Here's the question. So what meanings you probably have to curate? Well, that's hell of a complex question. But really what I'm trying to help you or asking you to discuss is this, that if you listen to what I said in the past half an hour, what are the terms, concepts, meanings you think that if you're put in charge of facilitating an organization to work together, what kind of things you need to discuss? What do people need to have shared meanings of? And again, you can think yourself as a leader, as maybe an external change agent, or maybe you're a member of the group who wants to find out share meanings. But really interested in what do you end up doing. So again, put a summary in the chat. I am now taking out this awesome room break. Where did it go? Oh, I can still wait, people. We had 196 before I said breakout room, and then about 25 people chickened out. Well, maybe they had good reasons. How should I know? Okay, I'm gonna give you 15 minutes. Oops, not 150 minutes. And here we go. And welcome back, everybody. I'm not sure if we have actually put these chat messages for you to enjoy, which just reminds me, we can, for example, this stuff is very interesting, so we can probably share it with you afterwards if you want to check out what other groups actually answered. I'm not sure if you can record that thing. So, yes. Oops, I need to check, click here. So here's my guess of what kind of meanings you need to start curating and facilitating or discussing or participating or whatever word you use. These are based on that book here on the left-hand corner. It is in Finnish. Sorry for those who don't know Finnish that well. But it's a free book we did about a year ago, a set of workshops with 30 executives from Finnish large corporations, also from startups, and also people who are experts on the transition that we're going kind of through about skills and competencies and all that. So from that book, so kind of saying that, okay, what did Finnish executives and experts say? But what are typically the things you need to start discussing in your workplace, in your organizations? In other words, what are the meanings you probably need to start curating as a museum curator? So what is change for our company? Everybody's, if we're running a change program, if there's a transition, what is change? What is it? Change for change's sake. What is considered work nowadays? Is it if I'm at home, taking a nap so that I'm actually more creative in the afternoon, is that work? If I'm having a discussion with somebody and creating shared meanings, is that work? I think pretty much it boils down in an organization what is about work, especially what is valued work. Who is responsible for lifelong learning? Again, learning is very much in the focus on what we've been talking. What is value? What is valued? That we talked a lot. What are the kind of skills required in addition to traditional skills? What we call here is meta skills. I'm pretty sure we're going to get back to this with Jari in a few weeks' time. Actually, the 2 last lectures are all about meta skills and going meta, if you will. And then the last is my favorite. What these people talked about in those workshops was that you get this rant that we should destroy the silos, break the silos or destroy them, and we should have no borders. But if you sit down for a second and think about it, an organization just simply does not manage without some kind of borders, lines, restrictions. So what are the desired silos? So some of the silos that you can actually, people can focus on things and not have everything all around them. So what kind of borders you need during the transformation, but also after the transformation. So those at least to according to those experts and executives, those are probably the things you need to start curating, if you will. Nevertheless, I have not really answered the question, so which one do I choose? Design, Agile, Lean Startup. So, of course, I'm not going to answer it, but I'm going to bring it back to this, what I talked about. So kind of starting to summarize what we talked here today. So, creating shared meanings. Now, here's again me as an engineer putting it really clunkily here. Where should I start? And of course, you should start somewhere. So for example, I just intentionally put here, let me see. That's not the business model canvas. That is the lean canvas, by the way. But it could be the business model canvas. Start somewhere. Start it with participation. You know, let's take this as our starting point, and then you open it up for discussion, the participation part. And then you have the reification part after the workshop, if you will. And then, of course, it becomes the next version, our version of the lean canvas. And then you start again, opening up for discussion. What does it mean? Maybe you try out in a real project, the participation part, then the reification, then the participation, and so forth and so forth. And that's what I call the curating and facilitating. And especially if you identify yourself as a facilitator and you've been doing a lot of this part, I really want to underline the curating part of this. So kind of the silent curator of a museum part from the flashy extrovert facilitation part. Okay, I just lost it again. So just to remind, oops, did I actually? No. Just to remind you and put this diagram into words that I'm pretty sure we have a shared meaning among all of us here, that you need to have them both. You need to have the tools, the objects, and the organization, the way that they are organized. And you need to have people's thinking, behavior, and understanding. So these are probably very familiar to you if you've been in the cultural transformation or you're working as even as a designer or developer where you're trying to change ways of working. You've heard many people talk about, or maybe you have read about that, you know, we need to change people's thinking. We need to have people behave differently. We need to make sure everybody understands this. But this is just putting this into this framework. That's the participation part. But if you miss the tools and objects part, then you're just doing the half of it. And of course, the other part is that if you just bring tools and objects and you organize people in a certain way without discussing the thinking, behavior, and understanding, then you're missing that part as well. So that's where all the canvases and sprints and workshops and all of these come in, that they are there to help you change how people think or listen how people think or affect people's behavior or to shape their understanding. And they come as a pair, just to remember that. So which one do I choose? Okay, let's eat or I'm going to eat my own dog food and put it into this last week's exercise. So here's your change program. This is your individual project. Maybe it's just a workshop that you've been asked. Somebody asked you, can you give us a workshop on the business model canvas? So what's actually the desired change? What is the impact? What has happened 1 year after the project for everything to be successful? After 6 months, after 1 month. This is what you did last week. So we not need to have here to reach the impact after 1 month. And then you go back further in past and then where do these come from? Where do I come from? What's our history? Are we familiar with design tools, or are we maybe familiar with lean principles from more of the management system perspective? Who needs to be involved? Maybe we have experts in the company already. And that, of course, affects where do you start. So which one you choose. Understanding the context, understanding the desired impact. And that should help you choose. Should I start with more with the design perspective? Okay, everybody here's a software engineer. Let's start with Agile principles. Let's introduce this tool and so on. And actually, here's an example I put here in the lastly. And this is something, I put the kind of the companies there where I've been working very much in this situation, that I've been asked to design an internal accelerator program. So in another ways, to design a program is a word for something that is a little bigger than a project, but it is a project at the end of the day. So 2-3 month project. And the accelerator here means in all of these company cases I have, actually the Telia one, I wasn't working there, but I was watching very closely from the sidelines. So really thinking of how do the accelerator program means that we have internal projects, and there is this special program where I would come in and bring these tools and thinking and methods and process. And the goal would be, how do we accelerate these internal product development or innovation projects so that they learn new ways of working, and that would eventually start the company change, the transformation. Oops. So to put it into this, it would be that after 1 year that we had the internal accelerator, which lasted about 2 to 3 months, we would have, or the company would have, their own way of working defined. Kind of ambiguous, if you will. Actually, 2 of 3 of those projects that inside the accelerator would be now real products. And also, in addition, it would be awesome that they wouldn't need an external coach anymore, that they would, a year from that project, they would actually have then some of those people in those original accelerator would have been trained into their own internal coaches or ambassadors or facilitators, or what do you want to call it. But typically what I put here in the green, that the desired impact often was, in a couple of these cases, that they would create an internal organization, some kind of an innovation lab, and hire a high enough leader to lead it. So that was really the desired impact in the long term. So, going back from there, so 6 months from after the program, establishing the innovation lab, recruiting experts, planning the role of the lab, and maybe 1 month after the program. So when the program stopped, then 1 month after, some of those projects had received actual funding to continue. The training of own coaches would have started. The second accelerator program, maybe after the first one. So it means that after the program, each of those projects would be ready to apply for funding. And after the program, there would be a plan of how the experiences from the program would be collected, communicated, and then used for the internal trainings, for example. So before actually then planning this accelerator, the questions I was asking from the client was, who was actually driving the change? So who are the people who are doing this already? What has been done already? Because of course, there's been a lot of different people in companies who have been kind of flag standard bearers of new kind of thinking and so forth. And importantly, what tools and processes they already have. So is it so that the marketing team, for example, has been using Kanban for a year? Maybe the software development is very, very familiar with Scrum. So these are, of course, important things to understand. And then finally, with some kind of an idea of all of these elements, then the planning, I would go into the planning of what needs to be ready when the program starts. And I just put here some of the practical things that I still remember very much, is that the participants are the key. So actually putting a lot of effort and focus that who are these people? Where do they come from? What are their expectations? Are they volunteered or have they been ordered? And they understand the big picture, something like this, or maybe the onion. Then, of course, that the business owners are committed, the people who give those projects, who are at the end of the day responsible for the projects and the business impact. And then also importantly, maybe this goes very much into the details of an internal accelerator, is that the projects that we put into this 2-3 month program, they have been chosen so that they actually, after a year, they can be real products. So really thinking further. And then I would, then I have in capitals clear calendars. So everybody who participates would need to have time to participate. And then in the red is choose the best bet. So what's my best bet? Where should we start? Based on all of this information, is it business model what kind of approach I would start? So that's kind of a very concrete example of running programs in a variety of companies over there. Any challenges in doing this? Yes. Well, I put this kind of like a last thing about challenges if you take the accelerator, because then I have this excellent article you can read about it. And I think this is very important if you are doing the change management, if you're doing the change leadership, especially in this innovation context that I'm talking about. And typically what I've been seeing and be taking part of that, people then start with this idea that there's an accelerator, that we kind of build this separate accelerator inside our large organization. And the kind of issues that I learned that bump up, and actually literature, academic studies and everything really point them out as well, is first of all, the very practical thing that what are the topics that go into the accelerator? So if you think the accelerator is, there's the larger business area, let's say it's a strategic focus area of the company. So what topics inside that business area go into the accelerator? Expectations of outcomes. What are the expectations for the business owners, the people who are responsible for the next layer in the onion? And what are their commitment as well into this special accelerator? And then on the kind of the individual level, the questions and challenges are who goes into the accelerator. So if you can then start, understanding the context, what are their, who are they? Are they the best and most talented people? Or are they the people who just at the moment don't have any work, so we can put them into this accelerator? Now, these are good questions and you need to understand them. And then the individuals who actually go into these transformation program accelerators, they should understand what happens to them after the accelerator. Is this just like a training? I went to the training, then I came back, nothing pretty much changed. Because then it becomes the end of how much do they commit into this accelerator program or this special project. If they know that they're going to go back into their own jobs after this, are they going to, what are their motivations to learn? What are their motivations to actually commit? Good questions. And then the whole question that if you start this kind of internal change program as a spearhead, the accelerator, how is it communicated to the whole company? What do you tell about it? What is going to happen after the accelerator is the question that the rest of the company is going to be asking. So to put it in other words, if you're doing an organization transformation and you have a spearhead project, which you most probably will have, then how do you communicate the role of that spearhead for the rest of the company who's not taking part in that spearhead? So what actually ends up happening is something like this. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. And that's actually the article I put there also in the readings for this lecture. And it's funny to see, again, that article by Kanter is from 1989. And it's talking exactly about things that have been happening in the past 5 to 10 years about innovation and innovation in cultural transformations in organization. Anyway, what happens is that the lab, if you will, actually ends up being separate from the business areas. So the business area, that is where the business happens. That's what producing most of the revenue or most of the value, if you will, for the whole organization. And it should keep on going. That's really the mainstream activities in a company, which people say that you should not break. And they say that for a good reason. Now this lab becomes kind of literally this kind of greenhouse outside with special conditions. And then the problem, what the article really says, and in my experience taking part of many of these, is to mind the gap. What is the relationship between this lab and the existing business in this organization diagram? So people kind of start and begin thinking that this is part of inside the business. But as you start answering those questions I had in red, you end up actually pushing this whole thing outside the existing business area because things just become so much easier. But then, of course, what happens is that you're growing this change inside this lab, literally. It's a lab. It has special conditions that you can grow things in a lab that you cannot grow in the real world. And then the more you do this, then it becomes a huge question mark. How do you integrate the stuff in the lab into the real world? And the stuff here, of course, is people's thinkings, people's tools, shared meanings, experiences, governors, all of the stuff that I talked about last week, budgeting and so forth. So to summarize, people, it seems like companies easily start creating these, you want a clean slate, what we talked about last time. Let's do kind of artificially a clean slate. Let's clean the table. Let's literally hire that building next to our corporate headquarters, which is empty, and start a new organization there from scratch. Because then things just become so much more easier. But then mind the gap. How do you integrate these two? How do you actually help that external organization transfer the rest of the company? Now that's a big question. Good. We're getting there. What time is it? 10 to 6. So as I said, and you probably guessed if you listen to my ramblings about champagne in the beginning, I'm going to ask you to write down the criteria for champagne. Deadline more or less next week. But if you have any troubles, so for example, if your pair never answers you or anything, then the deadline is of course flexible. Just let us know. I noticed the title here is from last week, but actually the contents here is updated. So what I'm asking you to now write down is the criteria for success for your pair's work. So again, you meet your pair, you ask, what is the current project? They can definitely use the same project they've been using for the previous exercises. Then, just ask them to, hey, you did last week these impacts, desired impact for 1 year, 3 months, 6 months. Can you explain me what it was? And then just take the dumb. Then you play dumb. Start facilitating, start helping them to make each impact, each desired objective and the success criteria doable, understandable, measurable, and beneficial. And out of those 4 letters, maybe the beneficial is the one that you maybe have to go back to and remember. Beneficial here means that it actually helps to achieve the desired impact. In other words, you can measure a lot of stuff, but if measuring that stuff doesn't help you to get the desired impact, it's not beneficial. Do that, switch roles, interview, sketch, you can draw a picture, you can write it up, whatever you feel comfortable with, but make sure whatever you are doing, the documentation, or now you can call it fancily reification, then make sure you understand what you're doing. That's the whole point. Because if you don't understand, then you need to ask questions. And then the other person has to understand the thing themselves so well that they can actually explain it to you. And then again, reflect in silence about what happened and then share the silence with your pair. Especially thinking again, I like the fact that sometimes you think, when is this tool optimal? What is the situation when this was a good tool? I can see people are leaving, even when we're not done. Such is life. But that's okay if people are leaving. This is my last slide. A couple of readings from today. Unfortunately, I don't think I can put all of these for you because 3 of them are books. I don't think I can share books for free with you publicly. The counter article I can definitely, Ona can put it there on the blog site. But I just put a couple of books I think are good thought-provoking books about balancing between design thinking, lean, agile, and all that. Have a look at them. And then of course Wenger's book is pretty thick in a way that it's physically actually very thick, but also it's very rich. But if you push yourself through it, then it's very, you will be happy. Anyway, to balance that, I put Jeff Gotthelf's, there's a Gotthelf, it's missing an F. So Jeff's talk from last year, which is actually in Yle Areena. It's in English. And there's a lot of good stuff there as well. Most of it is in Finnish. But Jeff's talk is really another take on what I was talking here today. So the difference is actually a bit more about the difference between these schools of thought. I actually pretty much sidestepped the whole question and said it depends. But I hope you still got something out of it. Next week, Jari is going to take us all into even deeper waters about facilitation. And like I said, more into the face-to-face facilitation, which is where the rubber meets the road, whether you are transforming organizations or trying to help people to achieve what they want. Answer the poll. See, the people who left didn't answer the poll. Launching poll now. And yeah, mark your participation so we can actually track you, whether you were here. I'm going to put on my headphones now if somebody wants to say something. Thank you for you all. Nice to have you. Thanks for the activity in the break rooms and comments in the chat and everything. And yes, you can ask us over email, but remember, Oona and us, we're getting a lot of email at the moment. And apologies for any noise in administration. We try to do our best, but you are 200 people. Okay.
All right. See you next week. And so we dig a bit deeper in this participation part. Okay. Thank you.
Polling done.
Hi, I have one question actually.
Yes.
Is there a reason behind the decision of switching partners each and every time with the assignments?
Yes, there is a point. The point is that you meet as many different people as possible, and which is great in itself, but it also teaches you to start from scratch. So really we're pushing you to learn that how to actually meet a random person and start doing this exercise with them.
Okay, fair enough. We were just...
Last point being that a year ago, a lot of people thanked that we did that. So you can blame them if you don't like it.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Risto, could you explain again a bit about the lab part? I didn't get that a bit. If you could.
Of course. So this lab part was just an example of an actual transformation program. So I need to take my headphones off because I hear myself on delay, and that's confusing my brain. So the lab was, which picture I should have? Maybe I'll have this one. So typically, if you think about organizational transformation, and you start it with some kind of a project in the whole organization, you don't start it that let's change the whole organization, pow. But typically how you do it, you start it with some kind of a project, a spearhead, that this is what we're going to do first, that you're going to try out the new ways of working. You're going to try out maybe a new governance model. Maybe you're going to, what is the first project for this that after a year we want to build an external innovation lab that already has this different culture. So what I was just saying that this is typically what happens, not just here in Finland, but internationally, and has been happening for actually decades. That's one way of tackling organizational change, that you start an innovation lab literally externally from the main organization. So that was what the lab meant.
Okay. So in a way, it's like this B model approach that you are having like your own organization with all the background legacy things, and that in parallel you build like a organization which you want to go towards to, and then you find, like you said, I think the parts which you need to connect then in order to make it happen.
Mm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I have a look at the article I put there, the Kanter 1985. 89.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Hey, may I actually continue a bit about the Accelerator program? So hi, I'm Heidi, and I got intrigued by your Mind the Gap. So if you would have a time machine and you could go back, let's say to the time you were working with Wärtsilä, What would you do to actually manage that gap?
Are you from Wärtsilä?
No, that was just a hypothesis.
That's a good question. Anyway, there are people here who are from Wärtsilä. I pretty much said here what I would do differently. So all of these questions I have here in the red, I would actually push to get answers.
Yeah, as a Telian, they are easy to agree, at least. On.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also understand I'm very careful about what I'm saying.
It's okay. It doesn't have to be the exact company. I'm just kind of like, because I think that's actually a really important question of the how to mind the gap, and just pushing some questions. I think that's just difficult when you have that organization kind of working like in a different way, and the other organization in a way sees it but it's not ready. So kind of how to really push it. And Wärtsilä is a big company, so kind of in there you have a lot of people who are not then exposed to that little going on there.
JP here. I've been also working with these kind of approaches in different organizations. I would first say, is this the right approach from the very beginning first? Because it's easy in a way to separate it. But as said, because I was smiling when I saw this picture, because that's the big challenge that you have, how to like infuse it, how you incorporate that. So how to do it so that it's already within the business area and do it a bit separately. That's because I've been seeing these kind of activities and sometimes work, but usually doesn't, because it's hard to in a way bring it back. So first of all, the methods, the ways of working are usually good, but is the separation of this kind of like
exactly
is it the right way of doing it? That's one way to looking like US companies who have been building these kind of labs. You don't really see that much anymore. It was like 5 years back in a way. So how to have the innovation within the business area or within the business, that's a hard thing to do, but maybe you don't need to mind the gap then.
I kind of like, because that's a bit the feeling that I've gotten somehow as well. But somehow always there, when there is new stuff happening, you always have the gap in a sense. But then maybe if I rephrase, if we just have a time machine and we go back, what would you do? Would you still come up with this lab if the company board of management is asking for that?
Yeah, I probably would. I thought that for a while. It kind of then depends, what does the lab mean? How big is it? Is it just, but definitely I would have some kind of a mechanism to have the internal ambassadors that would then scale up the change. And how do you actually generate those ambassadors? Means that these people have to create concrete results. And to create concrete results, you need to create something that has a business impact. And then, how should I say, a fast way to have business impact is to have these people in a greenhouse lab accelerator. But then definitely start planning from day one. That is the point that this lab grows and becomes the main business, and the existing business goes down. And what happens to people over there? Some of the problems I've seen from other big companies is that they have these labs, and then people kind of jump between, and then it becomes a lot of questions for the individual. I just learn new things in 2 months and then go back. What happens to me? What am I supposed to do with these? But definitely, I guess now I'm thinking that starting from the fact that the lab should have a best before date. That's one option. Jipe, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would say also, like in the beginning of this lecture, you talked about the lean management philosophy quite a lot, because what you should achieve is this kind of learning organization that in a way you don't need to have those kind of things. But I agree with you that you need to have some kind of mechanism within the organization to in a way speed up this kind of thing. But if you have already like quite let's say agile organization which can then incorporate these kind of new ways of working, then it works within it. But if you don't have it, that's the biggest problem, that you have like the legacy organization, then you have the new thinking, and then you have the gap there. But if you have managed to create that kind of culture that is learning from the very beginning and in a way can easily do these kind of new kind of things, then it's easy to infuse, and you get the people from in a way the lab or accelerator or whatever we want to call this innovation program in the organization, and then they can do the change within the organization. But that's the hardest part to do, how to create this kind of like reactive or proactive culture that is learning. And we have a lot of like Finnish companies that only way to do something cool and new is to have a lab, but then you have the gap.
But last week, for example, I talked about Yle. I think Yle has labs, very small ones. They have their news lab and all those. They don't, but they have achieved a cultural change without this kind of a lab mechanism.
But then again, you can call like team lab. Again, then those are like teams who are working within a specific team or stuff like that. It sounds cooler. It's a lab, but it's team that works. As far as I have the feeling, what I'm understood about it. But they have this kind of like culture that supports this kind of thinking. At least they managed to do.
Good. Hey, it's not nice for asking and commenting. It's fantastic.
Thank you for, going for it. That's always fun. Good thought experiment.
Yeah.